The cost of the war is starting being made apparent to the Russian middle classes. They are basically hemorrhaging cash. So they've raised taxes. Maybe they raise taxes again. He squeezes Russian society for money to pay for this war. The more society can say, but what exactly are we fighting for?
Hey, my name's Caolan. I'm a journalist based full-time here in Ukraine, and this is the second episode of the Culture Report. Today I want to talk about money. About a week ago, Russia put hundreds of missiles into the skies of this country. Many of them landed here in Odessa, but they landed in basically every major built-up city here. That missile attack cost about $1.3 billion, a huge amount of money. And Russia spends about 41% of all of its public money on defense, which is gigantic, almost half of all of its money. And the way that they're now paying for this is by doubling the tax rate. And Putin is under a huge amount of pressure right now. It seems like oligarchs have started to openly speak out against him in a way that's unprecedented. And people are very unhappy with the way that he's been turning the war recently. And in places like Russia, things like human rights might not matter very much, but money certainly is king. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. James Chaplin is someone that I met last year at the Intercontinental Hotel in Kyiv. We just bumped into each other, but he had an amazing analytical mind when I met him. The way that he discussed strategy, the way that he discussed the war, and the way that he discussed finances really blew my mind. And I wanted to bring him on the show today to get his perspective over what's happening with the financial situation in Russia. He's got offices based in Ukraine and a big presence here, so he's pretty much attached to what's going on in this country too. And I think he's one of the best people that could talk about what we're going to talk about today. So, James, it's great to see you. Right, so first off, what's going on with the Russian financial situation?
If you look at the budget and you look at the situation there, they've just increased taxes. They've increased income taxes, and they've also increased corporate taxes. Now, their tax base starting off from a relatively low base. You know, it's not like the UK. So you're talking about taxes going up from like 11 or 12% to like 20% or something. So it's not like in relative terms to what we're used to in the UK, it's still very low. But it is still going to cause some disquiet. The whole point is that what's happening with that, going very good point with the finance, is that the cost of the war is starting being made apparent to the Russian middle classes. Whether you're looking at inflation, whether you're looking at interest rates, whether you're looking at all these different factors. The governor of the bank came out recently and said, look, in terms of our reserves, we have about enough reserves for another 18 months. It's the other problem which no one's really talking about, which is everything links, right? Let's talk about China. So the Chinese economy is slowing down. And with all the sanctions that have been going on with Russia, their ability to sell, natural resources has been increasingly to sell them eastwards. Now, the Chinese economy is slowing down. What you're seeing is that the OPEC plus, which is OPEC plus Russia, are withholding about 3 million barrels of oil a day at the moment. And even with them withholding that amount, which is by relative standards a lot, the oil price is still barely scraping 70. So to give you some context, in order for the Russians' budget to balance, they need an oil price of about 110. 120. So they are basically hemorrhaging cash. They are struggling for ways in which they actually cover it off. Now, I'm sure that they'll start that, there are ways they can do it. The country has a lot of wealth, yeah. So they whether that's selling assets or whether that's going to be, liquidating assets, whether it's going to be, they might do some, seize, increased taxes on oligarchs, voluntary donations, all these kind of things. But it is going to cause pressure on Putin because, the more that he squeezes Russian society for money to pay for this war, the more society going to say, but what exactly are we fighting for?
How is that going to actually affect Putin? What is he going to feel? Are the people around Putin not furious about this?
Well, look, the first thing that happens is, as they start doing already, they start raising taxes, yeah? So they raise taxes, maybe they raise taxes again. They may look to do some bonds with the Chinese. That's another scenario they could do. Do the Chinese want to buy rubles? Not really. But it's all about terms. They There's another big trade which is going on at the moment, which you can keep an eye out for. It's seizure of mineral resources across Africa by Russian mercs, specifically looking at gold and other areas. So you're looking at Russia's involvement in dictatorships in Africa, and increasingly we're hearing talks of gold and other natural resources being flown out on planes into Russia.
Is Putin actually worried about this? Does he think he could win?
Putin's will is clear. He's not going to back down. He's not going to stop. He is determined to win, and he's going to look for every gambit he can think of to achieve his objectives. So if that means increasing taxes, he'll do it. If that means cutting deals to get cash in, he'll do it. If that means expropriating resources out of Africa, he'll do it. So what he's part of the gambit, therefore, because you look at the fact that Ukraine, they need support, right? And I don't know what the exact percentage is, but there's a lot of committed donations that were meant to have been made to Ukraine, which haven't yet materialized. And so Putin's also gambling that the West is very good at talking, but not very good at doing. And that's why when you read the news and you look at the challenges the Ukrainians have with their budget at the moment, and this is why Zelensky's frustrated, because in paper he's got all the commitments he needs to make everything work, but in practice the commitments are not materializing into cash. The talks which were meant to happen around the frozen Russian assets in European control, and just even getting the funds from the interest, that's still in talks. It's still not been released, and they talked about that a year ago. Started talking about a year ago. Still not been done. Yeah, and I think the final point is just to remember, like anything, and we've talked about this before, Caolan, as well. The real prize for this war is Crimea. Let's be clear. And the reason why Crimea is such a prize is because, once again, it's coincidences. 2012, the Ukrainians found off the shore of Crimea about the same amount of natural gas as is found in Norway, and they started putting up the drilling rigs, and then the Russians took Crimea and by default took the rights to the gas. And if you're looking at the midterm, what I would also say about the money is that whilst the Germans get a bad press, they're the second largest donators to Ukraine in financial terms, behind only the United States. I mean, it's a massive, the German financial contribution. And what's particularly interesting about that is that when you look at Germany, which is currently in a recession, where their industrial model was built around cheap gas, the Germans would love nothing more than to see a Crimea which is returned to Ukraine, where Ukraine can become a stable energy partner, because it's not a lot of work to integrate the pipelines at that point. And that's one of the reasons why the Russians did everything they could to stop this by taking Crimea out the picture. So where I see the focus of the war being is for Ukraine is going to be on the areas of land which have the highest financial value.